I was celebrating, bro.
And we were celebrating too early.
I was celebrating. I got a call on the beach 3 weeks later with my family. Say they just indicted you again. I feel like this the right move for me. I wasn't gonna go to trial with it from the dump, actually. They added a charge, say I was a drug addict.
Even after taking a plea deal, Boosie has officially been sentenced on a firearm possession charge. And this time, it's hitting different. For once, it feels like there's no way out. But the sentence itself, that's not even the wildest part. Boosie claims the system set him up, straight up framed him. Whispers on the block say this might all trace back to when he beat that death row case years ago. The streets are talking heavy, the hood's in disbelief, and hip-hop's feeling the weight, like one of its realest soldiers just got taken down for good. Torrance Ivy Hatch Jr., the man the culture knows as Boosie Badazz, just took a plea deal that could have him saying goodbye to the game, maybe forever. But to really get why this moment is so deep, you gotta rewind the story, all the way back to the gritty streets of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's where a young Torrance Hatch first grabbed the mic and started spitting his truth, turning pain into poetry and struggle into sound. But with fame came the shadows, the legal run-ins, the court dates, the mugshots that never seemed to stop. His rap sheet started to read like a timeline of survival, and each chapter pulled him closer to the edge. See, the roots of this chaos go way back to 2008, the year everything started spiraling. What should have been just another regular day in the hood turned into a full-blown nightmare that's still haunting him right now. On October 22nd, 2008, East Baton Rouge sheriff's deputies pulled Boosie over, and when they searched the car, they found marijuana and a Glock tucked inside. Now, anybody from the streets knows that getting caught with a little weed and a weapon ain't new news. But here's the twist. This was Boosie's third strike on marijuana charges, and that changed everything. The system wasn't about to play fair this time. They saw their chance to hit hard. What could have been a minor case turned into the setup of a lifetime, the start of a war Boosie's been fighting ever since. And deep down, he's been saying the same thing for years. They've been trying to take me out since day one.
They added a charge, say I was a drug addict. They say I was a drug addict, man, and
How are you even charged with that? That's a charge?
in the plea deal, that they throwing that out. I
Okay,
guess
they threw that out.
Streets believe him, because when you've already beaten death row once, the system don't forget. It just waits for the next shot. 3 years. That's all it took for Boosie's come up to crash into the system that's been swallowing young black men for generations. He was on the verge of breaking through in the dirty South hip-hop scene. The voice of Baton Rouge, raw, hungry, unstoppable. When suddenly he found himself trapped in the jaws of the prison machine. On September 22nd, 2009, Boosie pleaded guilty to his third marijuana charge, and that's when the system showed just how cold it could be. What came next wasn't justice, it was straight-up courtroom chaos. Judge Chip Moore first gave him 2 years, but when word got out that Boosie had stepped outside the rules of his house arrest between the plea and sentencing, that 2 turned into 4, just like that. November 9th, 2009, the day the system doubled down and made sure Boosie's freedom slipped even further away. But it didn't stop there, not even close. The system smelled blood and kept coming for him like it was personal. Even while he was locked up, they hit him with more charges, stacking them like bricks on his back. In 2011, still behind bars, Boosie was charged with trying to smuggle drugs into prison. He took the plea, and boom, his sentence jumped to 8 years. Imagine that. One of the hottest young rappers in the South, a man whose name was buzzing on every mixtape, now facing nearly a decade behind those cold walls. But the real storm hadn't even hit yet. What came next would shake Louisiana's entire rap scene to its core. On June 17, 2010, Boosie was indicted for first-degree murder, accused of being connected to the killing of Terry Boyd, who had been shot the year before. The prosecutors went all in, trying to paint Boosie as some kind of street kingpin calling hits from the shadows. They claimed he hired Michael Marlowe Mike Loud to handle business, calling it a murder for hire over a supposed territory beef. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about time anymore. This was life or death. If the jury bought what the state was selling, Boosie wouldn't just lose his freedom, he'd lose everything. The death penalty was on the table, and the world was watching like it was the ultimate showdown. Boosie versus the state of Louisiana. The prosecutors went all in, trying to paint Boosie as a stone-cold killer, claiming he was tied to 5 other murders. But here's the catch. They never had real evidence to back it up. It was all smoke, mirrors, and headlines meant to turn a rapper into a monster. The courtroom turned into a full-blown circus, prosecutors dragging his music into the mix like lyrics were murder weapons. They dissected his tracks bar by bar, treating every rhyme like a signed confession. Songs like 187 Inches and Body Bag, both recorded around the same time Terry Boyd was killed, became the centerpiece of their so-called evidence. They played those records in court, trying to convince the jury that Boosie wasn't just storytelling, he was testifying through his tracks. But Boosie wasn't folding under that pressure. On June 28, 2010, he stood tall in that Louisiana courtroom and pleaded not guilty. His defense team came ready for war. They tore the prosecution's case apart piece by piece. The state's star witness, Michael Marlowe Mike Loudon, had a story that kept changing like the weather. His testimony was so shaky, even the walls of that courtroom felt uneasy. Boosie's lawyers were so confident they didn't even bother to call witnesses. They just rested their case, basically telling the jury, "You see how weak this is?" That Louisiana courtroom was thick with tension. You could almost feel the whole world holding its breath as 12 jurors sat in silence, deciding whether one of the South's brightest rap stars would walk free or face death row. The hip-hop community watched like it was Judgment Day. If Boosie went down, it wouldn't just end his career, it could end his life. But fate flipped the script in the most dramatic way possible. On May 11th, 2012, after less than 10 minutes of deliberation, 10 minutes, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict. The courtroom erupted. People were crying, hugging, shouting his name. That lightning-fast decision said it all. The prosecution's case was weaker than watered-down liquor. Boosie walked out a free man, but it came at a cost. The victory was real, but so was the damage. The years lost, the reputation dragged, the trust shattered. He beat the case, but the war against the system, that was far from over. The prosecutors didn't just want to convict Boosie, they wanted to bury him. They came out swinging, trying to brand him as a heartless killer, throwing wild claims that he was tied to 5 other murders. But here's the truth. They never had solid proof. Not one real piece of evidence that connected Boosie to any of it. It was all smoke, headlines, and fear tactics, a performance meant to turn a rapper into a villain. The courtroom was chaos, pure spectacle, cameras flashing, reporters swarming, prosecutors pacing like they were starring in their own crime drama. They dragged Boosie's lyrics right into the trial, twisting his art into ammunition. Every line, every verse, every punchline got flipped and dissected like it was a confession note instead of creative expression. Songs like 187 Inches and Body Bag, bangers recorded around the same time Terry Boyd lost his life, became their so-called evidence. They blasted the tracks in court, trying to convince the jury that Boosie wasn't spitting rhymes, he was confessing crimes. But Boosie, he didn't break, didn't blink. On June 28, 2010, he walked into that Louisiana courtroom with his head high and his spirit unshaken. He pleaded not guilty, ready to fight for his name, his career, and his life. His defense team came armed like legal soldiers. Every document, every timeline, every phone record flipped right back on the prosecution. And when their star witness, Michael Marlowe Mike Loudon, took the stand, things started crumbling fast. His story shifted every time he opened his mouth. It was like watching a bad movie on repeat. No plot, no facts, no truth. The defense didn't even need to call witnesses. That's how weak the case was. They stood up, looked the jury dead in the eyes, and basically said, "You see this mess? They got nothing." The air in that courtroom was heavy, like smoke in a trap house before the raid. Everyone knew what was at stake. One decision could decide if a man lived or died. The hip-hop world was glued to every update, every headline, every rumor. From Baton Rouge to Atlanta to New York, fans were praying that justice would finally show up for one of their own. Then came May 11th, 2012, the day that changed everything. After less than 10 minutes of deliberation, yeah, you heard that right, 10 minutes, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict, and that courtroom exploded. People were shouting, crying, hugging. Even the guards looked stunned. That verdict hit like an earthquake across hip-hop. It wasn't just a win, it was a message. The state's case wasn't just weak, It was non-existent. The jury saw right through the lies and the media circus. Boosie walked out a free man, but the scars ran deep. Years stolen, his image dragged through the mud, his name turned into a headline. It all left its mark. Yeah, he beat the murder case, but the system didn't stop watching. Freedom came with a price, and Boosie knew it. The war wasn't over, it was just shifting to a different battlefield. He walked out that courtroom victorious, but with a warning written all over his face. They tried to end me once, and they'll try again. Boosie pulled up to America's finest city on what was supposed to be just another routine hustle. Shoot a video, rock a show, get the bag, and dip out. But what went down that weekend in San Diego turned into one of the wildest legal nightmares of his entire career. Second only to the time he beat that murder case more than a decade earlier. This one, it was digital age chaos, social media, federal heat, and street loyalty all colliding at once. It was May 6th, 2023. The sun was setting over San Diego's Chua View neighborhood. Calm skies, palm trees, and what looked like a regular day in paradise. But beneath that peace, the setup was already in motion. Boosie Badazz, 42 years old and still holding it down for Baton Rouge, had come to California with big plans, a video shoot, and a packed performance that night at the Phantom Lounge in the Gaslamp Quarter, one of the city's flashiest districts. He had no clue that the boys in blue were already watching his every move, waiting for that one mistake. And when it happened, it was straight irony, the kind that hits deep in the streets. The man who built his career on keeping it 100 was doing just that, being real, being visible, showing love to his fans. But this time, realness came with a price. According to court docs, San Diego PD had been monitoring an Instagram Live hosted by a known neighborhood Crip. On that live stream, cops claimed they spotted a familiar face, Boosie, chilling in a backyard with what looked like a black handgun tucked into his waistband. One simple moment, one frame on camera, and just like that, the feds had their target. See, in today's world, rappers don't just make hits. They live stream their lives. But what Boosie saw as transparency, the system saw as evidence. The same authenticity that made him loved in the hood became the snare that caught him slipping. From there, things moved fast. Police units mobilized like they were chasing down a fugitive. Using an airborne law enforcement unit, basically a police helicopter, they tracked his every move from the sky, following him as he hopped into a black SUV. That's when the scene turned full-blown cinematic. Multiple squad cars rolling out, the choppers circling above, tactical coordination like they were taking down a cartel. And for what? A rapper who was just in town to make music and entertain fans. The level of force they used was wild, overkill on full display. It wasn't just an arrest, it was a statement. In the blink of an eye, Boosie's business trip became a federal case. What should have been another win for the culture turned into the headline of the year. Boosie caught slipping in San Diego. The streets couldn't believe it. The internet went up in flames, and hip-hop started asking the same question. Was this really about a gun, or was this the system finally getting revenge on a man who refused to bow down? Boosie had come to Cali to stack some cash, connect with his West Coast fan base, and keep his grind moving. But before he could even catch his breath, the cops made their move. The traffic stop went down smooth and silent like it had been planned for weeks. And when they popped that door and started searching the ride, it was exactly what they'd been waiting for. Inside the vehicle, cops found 2 loaded handguns, 1 Glock and 1 Hellcat, sitting right there with Boosie and another man named Billy Johnson. That discovery set off a full-blown domino effect that would flip Boosie's world upside down all over again. At first, it looked like the situation might be handled. Nothing he hadn't faced before. The charges were serious, yeah, but not unbeatable. On paper, he was looking at a state case: possession of a firearm by a felon, concealed carry in a vehicle, possession of ammo by a prohibited person, and being an unlisted owner of a registered firearm. Heavy, but not hopeless. His lawyer, Megan Blanco, was already moving smart, ready to play chess, not checkers. The plan? Take a plea, own up to the state charges, and push for probation instead of prison time.
I've been fighting for probably 3 years now, probably.
3 years.
About 3 years, yeah, about 3.
For Boosie, that was strategy, not surrender. He'd been through the system enough times to know when to fight and when to finesse. Fans respected the move too. The streets knew what it was, a setback, not a downfall. There was real hope that this latest run-in would get handled quietly, maybe even serve as a lesson for the younger generation watching him navigate yet another storm. Everything was pointing toward a quick wrap-up until the universe decided to throw in a crazy plot twist. June 14th, 2023, San Diego County Superior Court. Boosie shows up for what should have been a straightforward hearing. Then, boom, out of nowhere, the state charges get dismissed.
Now, it was a state case. The feds came, picked it up. They had a ruling in the Supreme Court that went in my favor. And the case got dropped by the judge. The case got dropped. They went appeal the Supreme Court ruling. And they won on the Supreme Court ruling. Now it was back again. I could have appealed that, but that'll be 2-3 more years.
Just like that. For a split second, it felt like he had slipped the noose again. Another W, another close call dodged like a vet who'd learned the game too well. You could imagine that wave of relief, that deep breath, that little smirk of, I told y'all I'd be all right. But that peace, it barely lasted a minute. Because right as Boosie walked out of that courtroom, moments after the state charges vanished, the real trap snapped shut. Federal agents swarmed in outside the courthouse and hit him with a brand new case. Felon in possession of a firearm, this time under federal law. Just like that, the game changed. The state let him walk, but the feds were already waiting in the wings, ready to pick up where they left off. It was a cold setup, like watching freedom turn into handcuffs in real time. What looked like a victory instantly became another headline, another battle, another reminder that for Boosie Badazz, the fight was never just about music. It was about surviving a system that always had him in its sights. The moment the ATF boys stepped in, the whole game changed. Based on that same May 6th traffic stop, the feds officially took over the case, citing federal laws that straight up banned convicted felons from having any kind of firearm. And when the word hit, it sent shockwaves through Boosie's entire camp. His attorneys, Megan Blanco and Damon A. Orr, couldn't believe it. They called the federal arrest highly unusual, arguing it went against long-standing Justice Department policy that you don't prosecute the same person twice for the same offense. But this time, it felt personal. They hinted that Boosie's loud voice, his no-filter honesty about the criminal justice system, might have made him a target. In real talk, it made sense. Boosie's been calling out corruption, profiling, and double standards for years, in interviews, in bars, on Instagram Lives. So when the feds swooped in right after the state dropped their case, it didn't look like coincidence. It looked like retaliation. The emotional weight hit him hard. You could see it on his face. The exhaustion, the disbelief, the pain of having to fight the same battle all over again. Boosie opened up to his fans and let it all out. He went online and wrote a message straight from the heart. I want to take this time to apologize to my kids. I am sorry and I love y'all forever. That post hit deep, a raw moment from a man who'd always prided himself on being unbreakable. But the thought of possibly doing federal time while his 9 kids watched from home was clearly tearing him apart. Boosie pleaded not guilty to the federal charge, but this time, freedom didn't come easy. He was detained at first, locked up while his legal team scrambled to get him out. Then on June 20th, 2023, a magistrate judge finally granted him bail. $50,000 at first, later doubled to $100,000. The conditions were strict, but at least he could travel to perform and keep the money flowing while he waited for trial. Still, the pressure was relentless. That federal case was hanging over his head like a thunderstorm that just wouldn't pass. For over a year, Boosie was stuck in legal limbo. A man free enough to move, but trapped by uncertainty. He kept pushing through, touring, recording, showing up for interviews like nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes, the weight was getting heavier. Every show, every flight, every night in a hotel room came with the same haunting thought. What if they take it all away again? The people closest to him said it best. Boosie was living in legal purgatory, fighting to smile through stress that could break most men. The fame, the fans, the shows, none of it could silence the truth. He was staring down decades in federal prison. And this time, even he wasn't sure if he could beat the odds again. Just when it seemed like the storm would never end, fate finally threw Boosie a lifeline, a moment that felt like divine intervention. On July 12, 2024, U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bencivengo officially dismissed Boosie's federal firearm possession charge. The ruling was based on a landmark Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, United States versus Duarte, which decided that banning nonviolent felons from owning guns was unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. That decision flipped the whole script. Since Boosie's prior convictions were tied to nonviolent drug charges, his legal team seized the opening. They argued that under this new ruling, Boosie's gun rights had been wrongfully stripped, and the judge agreed. It was a massive legal victory, one that felt like a long overdue break from years of courtroom wars. When the news hit, the reaction was pure emotion. Outside the courthouse, Boosie couldn't hold it in. Tears of joy streamed down his face. He told reporters, "This situation made me see who was down with me and who wasn't. God had a different plan." It was a rare, vulnerable moment from a man who had fought through more battles than most could imagine. Not long after, he dropped a video from a lazy river at San Diego's Sicuan Casino Resort. Shirt off, smile wide, music blasting, celebrating like he'd finally been set free from the weight of it all. For those who had followed Boosie's journey since the early 2000s, this moment felt like redemption. The real kind. A man who had survived the streets, beat a murder case, served his time, and still came out swinging, was finally being vindicated by the highest level of the law. The culture celebrated it like a comeback for the ages. Boosie Badazz, the man they tried to bury, had once again refused to break. But if you thought that was the end of the story, think again, because the feds weren't done. Less than 2 weeks later, they came right back with a vengeance. On July 19, 2024, U.S. Attorney Tara McGrath's office re-indicted Boosie, this time with 2 federal counts. The first, possession of a firearm by a felon in interstate commerce. The second, a brand new charge, knowingly possessing a firearm while using or addicted to a controlled substance. And that wasn't all. The feds also came for his property. The re-indictment included a forfeiture demand for all firearms and ammunition tied to the case. The message was clear. They wanted to strip Boosie of everything, right down to the last bullet. If convicted on both counts, the sentence could stack up to 25 years in federal prison, a punishment so severe it felt like payback for daring to win in the first place. The celebration faded fast, replaced by that same familiar pressure, the kind Boosie had lived under for decades. He tasted freedom for a moment, but the feds were making sure he remembered. In their eyes, no victory is ever final. The emotional whiplash was brutal. 1 minute, Boosie was celebrating freedom like a man reborn. The next, he was staring down even heavier charges than before. It was like going from a victory lap straight into a nightmare. The same courthouse that had set him free was now the stage for his next downfall. When the news hit, Boosie didn't hold back. His reaction on social media was raw, fiery, and full of pain. He vented like a man who'd been pushed too far, posting in all caps, furious and heartbroken at once. You could feel the betrayal in his words, the disbelief that after everything he'd endured, the system was still coming for him. And the wildest part, that extra drug-related charge they threw on top, that was some straight-up grimy politics. Boosie questioned why it wasn't part of the first indictment, calling the whole thing a circus, and accusing the prosecution of straight-up overreach. Fans agreed. The timing was cruel beyond belief. They let him celebrate, let him smile, let him breathe for a second, only to snatch it all away with a new indictment that hit even harder. To the public, it looked like punishment disguised as justice. To Boosie, it felt personal. The message was clear. They weren't satisfied with watching him win. They wanted to break him. That's when reality hit him. This wasn't just about Boosie Badazz anymore. This was bigger than Baton Rouge, bigger than hip-hop, bigger than one man's freedom. This was about power, control, and what happens when a man from the trenches dares to defy a system that's been targeting him since the start. Still, Boosie wasn't ready to fold. Through sheer willpower, he kept pushing, but the fight was eating him alive. The feds weren't letting go. Every time he gained ground, they'd move the goalposts. Legal battles that were supposed to last months stretched into years. Motions, appeals, filings, a never-ending war fought with money, time, and stress. By the summer of 2025, Boosie was deep in the trenches, fighting not just the government, but his own pride. his own exhaustion, and the very streets that raised him. The man who once stood as the voice of resilience now looked worn, hardened, tired of always having to be the one who survives. Friends said the pressure was showing. His smile faded, his energy dimmed, his trust in people disappeared. The legal war was draining everything: his spirit, his family, and his paper. For nearly 3 years, he'd been trapped in a case that kept twisting, shifting, and hitting him from new angles. Every time he thought he'd escaped the maze, another wall appeared. Every win came with a price tag: emotional, financial, and spiritual. And for a man who once screamed, "I'll never fold," the meaning of strength was starting to change. Sometimes the realest thing you can do isn't to fight harder. It's to recognize when the game's rigged against you. Boosie was learning that the hardest truth in the streets and in life is knowing when walking away isn't weakness, it's survival.
Go for my plea August 26th, but that ain't how I go in Fed court. Once you take a plea, your sentencing ain't till 2-3 months after that, so.
The move that changed everything didn't come from lawyers, label execs, or street OGs. It came from home. From the people who truly loved Boosie, the ones who'd seen him fight too long, too hard for too little peace. Behind closed doors, those conversations were heavy. Real tears, real emotion, no cameras, no ego. His family finally got through to him. They made him see what pride had been blocking all along. That sometimes the most gangster thing you can do isn't standing tall in front of the system. It's knowing when to sit down for your peace. They told him straight up, "You already proved your strength, now protect your life." And on August 4th, 2025, the world got the message loud and clear. Boosie announced on X, formerly Twitter, that he had accepted a plea deal in his federal gun case. The news hit like a bomb across the hip-hop world. Fans were stunned. This was Boosie Badazz, the same man who'd gone toe-to-toe with the system for decades, who'd beat a murder charge when the odds were impossible, who'd screamed about his right to bear arms from Baton Rouge to Breakfast Club interviews. Now he was copping a plea. People didn't know what to think, but those who really knew Boosie understood this wasn't surrender. This was survival. This was strategy, not defeat. His pride had been bruised, sure, but his priorities had shifted. It wasn't about proving he couldn't be broken. It was about making sure his kids didn't have to visit him behind bars again. And at the center of that decision, his mother's voice, her wisdom, her prayers. The same woman who held him down through trials, poverty, fame, and prison had finally said enough was enough. And this time, Boosie listened. By August 26, 2025, it was official. Boosie stood before a federal judge in San Diego and pleaded guilty to 1 count of being a felon in possession of a firearm.
And Hatch currently lives in Atlanta. Now he faces a maximum of 15 years behind bars. His defense attorney did not disclose any parts of the plea agreement or any details about it, but the judge made it very clear today, regardless of what's in that plea agreement, it is the sentencing judge who will have the final say.
The courtroom atmosphere was thick, a mix of heartbreak, relief, and respect. His fiancée sat behind him, family members at her side, some holding hands, others wiping tears. Everyone knew this was bigger than another legal chapter. It was a turning point in Boosie's life. When it was his time to speak, the weight of the moment hung in every word. He didn't sound angry anymore, just tired, humbled, and human. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him, asking what he needed most from his fans during this time. His answer stopped everyone cold. "Just pray for me and my kids, that's all I need." That quiet plea hit harder than any lyric he'd ever written. It was the raw truth of a man who'd finally been worn down by a fight that never seemed to end. Under the plea deal, the maximum penalty was 15 years, but prosecutors agreed to drop the second firearm charge tied to alleged drug use. In return, they recommended a 2-year sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised release once he got out. They even agreed not to chase extra fines, admitting Boosie's financial situation wasn't what it used to be. It was a small mercy in a brutal system. Court documents later revealed the detail that locked in federal jurisdiction, the so-called interstate element. Prosecutors disclosed that Boosie had legally bought the Glock and Hellcat handguns in Georgia, then brought them with him to San Diego on a Delta Airlines flight the very same day he was arrested. That interstate movement of the weapons was what turned a state case into a federal one and sealed his fate under national law. But behind all those legal papers and technicalities, there was something bigger at play. The human cost. Years of stress, Anxiety and fear had stripped away the armor Boosie wore for so long. The rapper who once shouted defiance at the world now stood as a man who'd seen every angle of fame, freedom, and loss. And for once, it wasn't about headlines or pride, it was about peace, family, and legacy. Because when it's all said and done, no amount of court time, rap fame, or street respect can measure the weight of a man trying to reclaim his life, one plea, one breath, one truth at a time. Boosie's attorney, Megan Blanco, spoke with the weight of years in her voice, the kind that comes from watching a man carry the world on his back. Standing outside the courthouse, she made it clear that while the fight wasn't over, her client's heart was in the right place. "I'm optimistic for Mr. Hatch," she told reporters. "He wanted nothing more than to accept responsibility and put this behind him. Now it's my job to make sure the court understands the scope of this case, what it's really about." Her words painted the picture perfectly. This wasn't just another rapper catching a charge. This was a man trying to finally stop the cycle that had chased him for decades. But the timing of what came next made the whole situation even more painful. Boosie's sentencing was officially set for November 21st, 2025, just days after his 43rd birthday. What should have been a time to celebrate another year of life had now become a countdown to judgment. The same week his family should have been throwing a party, he'd be standing in front of a federal judge, waiting to learn whether his next birthday would be spent behind bars. Still, Boosie didn't crumble. While free on his $100,000 bond, he kept pushing, performing, recording, and keeping his name alive. He told his fans straight up that he wasn't giving up, breaking down the slow crawl of federal court timelines like a man determined to stay in control of his own narrative. And that resilience, that's what made people respect him even more. Because no matter how hard things got, Boosie kept grinding. He didn't disappear, didn't hide, he showed up. The man dropped an entire album, Words of a Real One, on August 1st, 2025, just days before pleading guilty. Every track felt like a message to his people, pain, faith, and truth wrapped in bars. It proved that even when the world was trying to break him, Boosie was still finding a way to speak his truth and feed his soul through music. But not everybody showed love. While fans were rallying around him, some people couldn't wait to kick him while he was down. The loudest voice in that mix, Charleston White, a controversial figure known for chasing headlines and disrespecting anybody who stood tall.
Please make Boosie an example for all street niggas. To Lord, let them know every knee go bow and every tongue go confess. Boosie need bow like a right now.
White saw Boosie's legal situation as an opportunity for attention. He taunted Boosie online, mocking his legacy and questioning his place among the greats. The stuff he said wasn't just petty, it was downright cruel. At one point, White even went as far as publicly hoping Boosie would die in jail. The comment sent shockwaves through the culture. Even people who were used to Charleston's outrageous antics said he went too far this time. It was ugly, and it showed just how divided the internet can be. One side rooting for downfall, the other side praying for redemption. But through all the noise, the love outweighed the hate. Boosie's real fans, the ones who grew up on his music, who saw him rise, fall, and rise again, flooded social media with messages of support. Fellow rappers, street legends, and industry vets gave him props for the maturity behind his choice. They said Boosie wasn't giving up. He was growing up. Taking the plea wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It showed that sometimes being a man means putting your family over your ego and your future over your reputation. Because at the end of the day, Boosie Badazz isn't just fighting for his freedom anymore. He's fighting for peace, for legacy, and for the chance to finally live life on his own terms, not the system's. There's a quiet calm in Boosie's voice these days, the kind that only comes after years of chaos, pain, and reflection. In recent interviews, he sounds like a man who's finally made peace with his reality. No more running, no more fighting the wind, just acceptance. Even with uncertainty hanging over his future, there's a sense of clarity in his words, like he's finally made peace with whatever comes next. As November 21st, 2025 draws closer, the entire hip-hop community is on edge. Fans, rappers, and critics alike waiting to see how the next chapter of Boosie Badazz's story unfolds. It's not just another court date, it's Judgment Day for one of the most raw, unfiltered voices the game has ever known. At the center of it all sits U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bencivengo, The same judge who once dismissed his charges before the feds came back swinging. Now she holds Boosie's fate in her hands. The choice between the recommended 2-year sentence and the 15-year maximum that could change his life forever. Still, when Boosie talks about her, there's something different in his tone. A rare hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this time he'll finally get the fair shake he's been denied for most of his life.
I mean, I just feel like, and this time I don't have a judge that hates me.
Yeah, you've always said you had a good judge.
Yeah,
You've been saying
this the first time I've ever had a judge who I would say is fair.
For once, the system might see him not as a headline or a statistic, but as a man who survived it all and still stood tall. Whether November 21st, 2025 becomes the day Boosie Badazz officially closes the chapter on his street legacy, or just another twist in a lifetime of battles, one thing's undeniable. His story is already the stuff of hip-hop legend. From the gritty projects of Baton Rouge to the cold walls of federal courtrooms in San Diego, Boosie's journey captures everything that defines real survival. Talent, tragedy, struggle, and unbreakable will. It's not just the story of a rapper. It's the story of a man who's been tested by life at every turn and somehow still refuses to fold. Whether he walks free or faces more time, Boosie's name will forever carry the weight of one truth. He lived his truth loudly, he fought every fight fiercely, and he never stopped being Boosie Badazz. As the countdown to November 21st, 2025 ticks closer, hip-hop isn't just watching, it's holding its breath. This isn't about gossip anymore. It's about legacy, redemption, and the price of survival when the whole system's been stacked against you. From the streets of Baton Rouge to the federal courts of San Diego, Boosie Badazz has walked through fire, facing murder charges, beatdowns from the media, federal raids, and his own demons. Yet somehow, he's still standing, still speaking, still Boosie. Whether Judge Kathy Ann Bency-Vengo gives him 2 years or 15, the outcome won't define the man. The journey already did. Every scar, every bar, every courtroom step told the same story. They can cage the body, but never the soul. And that's what makes this saga so powerful. It's not just about Boosie's legal fight, it's about what he represents. A whole generation that refuses to bow down. A culture that finds truth in pain and strength in the struggle. No matter what happens on sentencing day, Boosie's impact is already carved into hip-hop history. The voice of the trenches, the proof that survival is an art form. You can hear it in his lyrics, see it in his eyes, and feel it in every headline that tried to bury him. So now the world waits. Will this be the end of the Boosie Badazz story? Or just another twist in the life of one of rap's most unbreakable figures? One thing's certain, the man who fought the system and lived to tell about it ain't done telling his truth yet. If you made it this far, don't stop now. Click on one of the videos on your screen to dive deeper into the untold stories shaping hip-hop culture right now. This is BarzBuzz, where the real stories in hip-hop don't just get told, they get felt. Was Boosie's fight with the feds the final round in his war for freedom? Or just the beginning of something bigger? Tap in, hit subscribe, and stay locked. Because this story isn't over. It's evolving right in front of us. If this saga had you shook, wait till you see what's next. You already know what it is. BarzBuzz got the real, raw, and unfiltered breakdowns. So don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to catch up.